Hello everyone, welcome to the session. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Thanks for confirming. So we'll start off with week 8, and the topic for today's session is going to be simple, a small topic, but it is very important when it comes to application security. All right. So what we are going to do is now, as you know, that when you create a MAT2 project or any application in MAT2, what you generally do is the backend is more of an API based backend, right? So you create API endpoints for the backend, which is then later connected to the view as a front end, and then the front end and the backend communicate with each other. Now the thing is, now what about security, right? So the thing is, when you try to use this application, you need to make sure that the right user or an authenticated user is trying to access the application with their own login credentials, right? To make sure, you need to make this thing happen, you need to secure your backend. Right now, there are ways to secure your front end also, that we will see when we are going into more of connecting your front end with the backend. But at the end of the day, it is the backend that needs to be more secure. All right. So what we are going to do today is we are going to secure our backend. We are going to create a small backend, okay, and then we will implement security to it. And what we are going to actually implement is what is called as token-based authentication, right? So we are trying to authenticate, or we are trying to implement authentication, and the basis of this authentication is going to be JSON token, right? That is the reason what we are going to use today, the framework or the library that we are going to use today is JWT token or Flash JWT token, right? So with the help of that, we are going to create a small backend that will involve database and everything. And then we will see how do you secure this, secure the endpoints with the help of token-based authentication. All right. So with that, I will share my screen and then we will continue. Okay, so I hope my VS Code is visible. Now, what happens is generally in MAD1, you may have seen session based authentication. So, there was this topic called Flask login, right? So, probably you have got the chance to look at the sessions that we have taken on Flask login. What does Flask login do? It tries to implement authentication, which is session based authentication, right? So, all the configurations are done with the help of session based authentication there. The user credentials and everything are stored in session, and it is retrieved with across the application. In this case, what we are going to do, or in this case, what we are going to do is, since we now do not have an application which is using Jinja 2 or something, we just have a backend that is created in the form of APIs. So there are some resources, and we need to protect those API resources. All right. That is why we cannot rely on session-based authentication. While it is fine, we can do that, but we will be more focused on, or more conventional way of doing that is to implement token-based authentication. Okay, now there can be multiple ways to implement this. There is something called as Flask security also, which is a framework or an extension of Flask, helps us to create authentication. All right, so there is probably one of the sessions that we have taken in the past. I'm not sure, probably in Jan 24. Okay, not Jan 24, sorry, September 24 term. So the third term of last year, the security based sessions or week 8 sessions there were based on Flask security, right? So if you want to refer to that, you can refer that also. But in today's session, we are going to cover token based authentication with Flask JWT. All right, so there is a difference between there is no difference between how security is being implemented by Flash security and JSON token, but the way of implementation is different. Okay, so when you get the chance to watch both the session, do watch so that you understand the differences. All right, this session and the one that I've taken on Flash security. All right. In either case, it is both token based, but the way of implementing is different. Now, why are we, if Flash security also is doing a token based authentication, why do we have to jump onto JWT based token? So the thing is here, it completely focuses on JWT token, and that is the reason it simplifies the application a lot, right? So when you see that session, when you watch that particular part of code, you'll understand that the configurations that are required for Flash security are quite more than a JWT based authentication, right? So when I use this framework called Flash JWT, simply put, or Currently it is Flask JWT extended. This is the framework that we are going to use. Don't worry, I'll be using this in the code and it will be more clear. So when we use this framework, what happens? The way of implementing or the way of configuring the token based authentication becomes quite simple. All right, whereas unlike in the case of security. All right, but if you don't want to get into details of that, just want to understand how authentication works, just watch this session and that should be okay. So it will be done. You'll be able to implement this in the project also. So those who are also following the project sessions may find this session very familiar, because the same thing I've covered in the RBAC part of project. All right, probably the second or third session. All right. Okay, so what we are going to do?
Sir,
We are going, yeah,
which session are you talking about?
project-based sessions.
No, no, no. You said no. What's some part of session? This was the second session that you mentioned. Earlier, you were mentioning some other sessions, right?
Yeah, that is again week 8 sessions of September 24 term. So they were based on Flask security, okay, which is a framework of Flask. This is based on another framework, that is Flask JWT extended. So Flask security is a larger umbrella, which which has multiple things like Flask login, Flask security, session-based authentication, token-based authentication. So it is quite, I mean, comprehensive, I would say. But this is completely focused on JWT. All right. So these are two different sessions
That was
that
Mad
I
1
will be.
session or Mad 2 session?
MAT 2 only. MAT 2
Okay.
only. MAD 1, we cover security in week 9. All right. So MAD 1 also you will find Flask login sessions. One of my past. I don't remember the term exactly, but Flask login you will see there. All right. So Flask login is covered as a part of security in MAD 1. Flask security as a framework is covered in MAD 2 week 8, but I think September 24. And in today's session, we are going to cover Flask JWT. All right. So based on the use case, based on what how we want to implement things in our project, or any application we are creating, we go through this. Right. So you should always, I mean, if you are following my sessions thoroughly, you should always go through these sessions: Flask login session of MAD 1, Flask security 2 session of MAD 2, and then this JWT 2 session. So you will understand how security is implemented in different ways. Okay. All right. So with that, we'll continue. I'll just create a project. All right. And how do we create a project? We will try to modularize this and keep it simple, not complicate it too much. So I will be having first our app.py. So I'll create app.py. All right. And then I will create this folder, which is going to be the application folder. Okay. All these things into the root directory. Within the application folder, I'm going to create some files. One of it is going to be config.py. config.py, right? config.py. Next is going to be a database.py. Okay, so some of this, I mean, creating Flask structure, creating Flask app, and all those things is going to remain common, because not every application is completely different, right? Most of the applications, their configurations are going to be very same. It is the additional thing that we add to the application. So we have config.py, database.py. Then we will create a model. So we'll also create a model.py. All right. Then we are going to create some routes. So routes.py. All right. And then there is one specific file or a file which is specific to JWT, which is, you can name it anything, but I find this more relevant, security.py. Okay. So these are going to be our files. If we need more files, we will create it on the go. Right. So we'll start off with config.py. Okay. In the config.py, what we're going to do is just create a config class. So I'll just create a class. Okay. And then directly name it as local development config.
Sir,
Okay.
can you
Most of the
zoom it
part,
a little bit?
yeah. Most of the part, which is going to be, common, which I've very often used in the session, I'll slightly go a bit fast, and things that are very specific to this session, I'll try to explain those things. Okay. All right. So we have this local development config, which is going to be a class. It will have some set of configurations. Okay. And most of these configurations are, predefined. So you kind of don't need to get into details of that, but, and most of them you have used. Okay. So first is SQL Alchemy. First is debug, right? So we want to set debug equals to true, right? Because if we are in the development config, sorry, not false. So we are in the development config. We always want to keep our debug mode as true. Okay, then as I said, we are going to connect with database. So I will SQL Alchemy database URL, SQL Alchemy database URI. Okay, and then how do we mention SQLite? Okay, everything in the form of strings. SQLite colon slash slash slash. Just name it as anything like JWT data dot DB or dot SQLite3. Okay, both the extensions are just fine. Okay, so this is going to be our configuration for database. Then there is something called as SQL Alchemy track modifications. Okay, don't have to worry about what this is. We'll just keep it because it just throws a warning later on if you don't do this. Doesn't happen. I mean, does not throw any error, just a warning. So it's better to avoid that warning, and we will set this to false, right? So SQL Alchemy track modifications. This is always set to false. Okay, then there is one very specific configuration which is important when it comes to JWT. So you can call it JWT secret key, JWT secret key. Okay, I'll come to what it does in some time. Okay, you can name it anything. Is this is a secret key. Okay, in general, I mean, when you're planning to host this application, this has to be a lot more complicated. Okay, but for the demonstration purpose, this is fine. All right, so that's all. This is all the configuration we will need in our application. All right, so I'll save this. Next, I'll go to database.py and very quickly I'll create a DB object. All right, so this DB object is created from SQL Alchemy. So what I'll do from SQL Alchemy import SQL Alchemy. All right, from SQL Alchemy import SQL Alchemy, and with this we or it is I think Flask SQL Alchemy. Flask, because we are using Flask SQL Alchemy, not only SQL Alchemy. It does not matter, but it's always better to use this because most of our sessions are using Flask SQL Alchemy. Now, once this is done, we'll create this object called DB object. Okay, so how do we create that? SQL Alchemy, and that's all. Okay, that is the only thing we need in this file. Okay, now why are we doing this? Because this DB object we will need in multiple modules, right? So we'll need it in models.py, we'll need it later in routes.py, we will need it in security.py. So since this single object is going to be used in multiple other modules, I've separately created it, and whenever I require it, I'll just import them. All right, and that's all. Next is going to be model.py. Okay, so what we are going to do first, import this DB object, right? So how do we import this? From database import DB. Okay, now there is one simple thing that you have to note. You cannot simply write database, you have to write dot database. All right, why is that? Because both model.py and database.py are not in the root directory. All right, but they are siblings, right? They are basically together in one directory, but not the root directory, right? So this has to be mentioned. Dot tells that okay, this is not a root directory, but they are coming from the same directory. Okay, so from dot database import DB, and with the help of this DB, we are going to create a user model. All right, so how are we going to create user model? It is very similar to how we generally create user model, right? So we'll create a class user and then DB dot model. Okay, and then there are certain attributes to this. First is ID, which is going to be DB dot column. Okay, and then this ID is going to be integer, so DB dot integer. Okay, this id attribute is going to be primary key, so primary key set to true. Okay, not this true, capital T. All right, that's all for this id. Then we are going to have username. Okay, username is going to be db dot column. Then we have db dot text. All right, so we can use anything we want. We can either use string or we can use either text, does not matter, both are fine for SQL Alchemy. All right, so db dot text, Okay, and usernames are generally unique, so we'll set this unique attribute to true. So unique equals to true, and obviously it cannot be null, so nullable equals to false. All right, this is about the username. What about password? I'll just copy the same line on the top and just name or just replace the things that I need. All right, so password, it is also going to be a column. It is also going to store text. All right, password may not be unique, right? So two people can have same password but they cannot have same username, but password cannot be null. Okay, so I'll just keep this as it is. Right, this is going to be our user model. All right, so what we have done so far, we have created this config.py. In the database.py we created db object, which is in turn used in models.py or model.py, and with the help of this db object we have created this class called user. Right, so that is all about model.py. Okay, next comes the security.py. So this security.py, most of the things are pre-built. Even if you go to the documentation of Flask JWT extended, you will see these things which are directly used. So you don't need to get into details of this. Just use it as it is. That is the reason I'm using it. But I'll explain what happens here. Okay, so this is the file or this is the content of security.py. I'll just paste it and then I'll explain. Okay, so what is happening here? First, we very similar to how we imported SQL Alchemy model from Flask SQL Alchemy. Similar on the similar syntactical structure, Flask JWT extended is a library that takes care of JWT token based authentication, and there is this class called JWT manager which needs to be imported. Why? Because we need to create JWT object. Now, if you just compare first and fourth line of security.py to the first and the first and third line of database.py, you'll see very much you'll see they are very much similar, right? So you import the class from which you're going to create object, right? So from Flask SQL Alchemy you import SQL Alchemy and then you create a db object. Very similar to that, from Flask JWT extended you import this JWT manager class and you create a JWT object. All right, now this import is required because we want to import that user class from the model. Okay, so that is the reason, if I want to use if I want to import the user, what I'm going to do, from model import user, but then again I have to make sure that I'm using dot, because again this model.py and security.py are in the same directory, which is not the root directory. Okay, had it been root directory you don't need to put this dot, but since this is not a root directory, you'll have to put that on. All right, now
Sir,
what
I have
is
a
happening here?
question.
Yeah.
Means when I was doing this, I was getting like circular import errors. So means why you are not getting that?
uh, See, probably there might be some place where you're using I mean you're importing creating one object here, importing there, and then creating one object here and importing here, right? In my case, what is happening, my db is created
Mm-hmm.
somewhere else, and both the modules model.py and security.py are importing db object from the external module, right? So if I do this, I mean, if I go to this model.py, okay,
Mm-hmm.
if I go to this model.py and I create, for example, if I do this like this, so let me just copy from here and put everything in model.py. Instead of this, let me just comment this.
Mm-hmm.
And if I do this, same thing. So this model.py is completely fine. But what is happening here is uh, this DB object,
Mm-hmm.
okay, this DB object is, so this security.py is now importing everything from model. It has nothing to do with DB.
Okay.
Okay, so one import is happening here, but then later on in some, probably in some of the other model, some of the other module, you might be exporting this JWT object that we have just created, right? So that may be, I mean, I don't know your internal structure, that is why I'm not able to pinpoint what exactly is happening there or what is causing circular import.
Mm-hmm.
But in our case, what is happening, our db object is completely independent. And I mean, the reason for creating db object independent is this, right? Because it is going to be used in multiple other modules, so why not create it separately and then use it wherever you need it, right? So we are going to need it in models. I imported it like this. I was going to need it in routes, so later
Mm-hmm.
on I'll import. I'm going to need it in security.py, so I'm importing it like this. All right, now
Okay.
here if you see, I'm not directly importing db, but I'm using importing this user model, right? So
Hmm.
this is like linear import, it is not a circular import. right? One module
Okay.
getting imported to the other, which is in turn getting imported to the third one, like that. Okay, so that
What I
structure you will
was
have to check.
doing was from model import whatever the classes I have defined, means basically the tables object
Hmm.
that we have defined right here. That
Okay.
was, and this DB was present in this particular model only.
Yeah, so try to create this module, external module, database.py,
Mhm.
and just create the DB object there.
Okay.
Okay, and wherever DB is required, you import it there.
Okay.
Okay, so this is very common structure that I generally use. Okay, now generally you won't see this circular imports across these modules, but when it comes to app.py, I will tell you a scenario where you can experience that circular import. Okay, let me go to app.py later. Okay, so we have this models.py, and is the database.py is fine? Okay, fine. All right, so now what we are going to see here in security.py is first you import. So you understood line number 1 and 4. Now what is this? We are going to use this. We are going to need this user class. That's why we are importing it from dot model. Right? I hope the dot is clear. Okay. Now there are these two decorator functions. I mean, what decorator functions in Python are basically what callback functions in JavaScript. So these are generally you will always or sometimes you'll see that these are also referred to as callback functions. Okay, you don't need to get into details of why exactly callback, but this is generally they use this convention. Okay, but what is happening here? Okay, what is happening here? To understand what is happening here, we need to actually understand what is it we are trying to do, right? So we are trying to make sure that our routes are protected. Now what do you mean by protected? Protected meaning only a person or only a user who has properly registered in the application, has proper credentials, and has logged in should be able to view them, right? Not anybody from the outside should be able to view them. This means this entire concept of security is revolving around this user object, right? So username, password, or for that matter, anything, any attribute that the user has, right? In our case, there is this. Yeah, in our case, it is only username and password. But later on, let's say when you work on a project, you will have multiple other attributes that are, related to a user model. All right. So all the attributes individually define what a user is, right? And these attributes will be present in the database only if the user has registered. And what we are trying to do here is what do we understand by the term security here is the user who has credentials in the application, and who with the help of that credentials, the user if has logged in correctly should be able to go to the endpoint, right? So the entire idea of security is revolving around this user. All right, so when you want to make sure that a protected route is accessed only by user, you need to load user and see whether this user exists in the database or not, whether the application is able to fetch the user from the database or not, right? Now if you try to read this message, if this function, most of the things will be clear, right? User identity loader, right? So what are we trying to load? We are trying to load the identity of the user. Okay, and what is it that we are trying to load the user from? We are trying to load the user from username. All right, now I'm speaking something, it looks something, but since you need to focus on this, right? This is a decorator function. Internally these things are happening. Okay, I cannot show you whatever is happening line by line, but with the help or with the idea that there is a decorator present, you need to understand that there is an internally some functionality happening which loads the user information from the database with the help of this user object. All right, so this function or this decorator is used to load the identity of the user. All right, or basically define how do you want to recognize the user. In our case, what are we going to use to recognize the user? It is the user.username. All right, now who recognize the user? So there are two questions: how do you want to recognize the user, and who recognizes the user? All right, so the first function tells you or gives you the information of how do you want to recognize. I want to recognize user with the help of my username. The second function, user lookup loader, helps you to or tells you that how you're going to recognize, right? So if you see this, what is going to happen? The same user object that was created here, that was returned here, is actually fed here internally. Okay, we are not using or using this function within this and passing on the argument. That is happening internally because there is this decorator used. Okay, so what it does, you see this variable called identity. This identity is basically what is returned here. Okay, so what we are trying to say here, I am trying to retrieve the user from the identity given here. Okay, so notice this JWT data sub. So what happens here is just I'll just write and show you. Okay, so what happens here is the moment I write user.username, the JWT internally will try to identify or try to fetch user information with the help of this username. All right. And this username information is what is internally called as subject. This is what is called as subject. Okay. So what I'm trying to say is, what is the subject of loading your user? It is the username. All right. Which is in turn written in short as sub. Okay, so that is what you're seeing here. All right, and when this function is loaded, or when the return statement of this function is fed into this function, it is fed something like this in the form of JSON. So there is something called as sub, okay, which will load the username. So it is going to be user.username, and there are some other attributes that we don't need to worry about. It is called as IAT, okay, and then there is something called as EXP. Okay, so IAT stands for issued at. Okay, this means the moment the user logs in, the timestamp of that is noted here. Okay, so user.username is issued as a subject at this point. All right, and obviously a token has an expiry, so that expiry is set here. Okay, do we really need to know these things? No. Okay, but just for the understanding of how these two functions are working, we are just doing it, right? So what is happening here? The first function, user identity loader, tells us how do you want to recognize the user. It is the user.username. This user.username is actually fed here. Okay, and then with the help of this function, now if you just remove this, okay, what is happening here? User.username is returned. I'm saying user.username is nothing but subject. Okay, where is this subject stored? It is stored in this value called identity. And where is this identity used? It is used here. So at the end of the day, what am I filtering my username with? User.username. Okay, so if you try to see this, user.username going as subject, subject going as identity, okay, which is in turn is used by this filter by function. Okay, and how is it how is it filtering? Username equals to identity, and what is the identity? It is user.username. So at the end of the day, we are telling these two functions, okay, load my user with the help of username, and what do you want to load? Okay, so what I want to load, I want to load the entire user object. What are we going to get from here? The entire user object. This means my token, whenever I create a token, my entire user, the information of entire user will be stored into that token. All right, why do we need this? We will see that later. Okay, but I hope these two things are clear at this point. Any query till this point?
Sir, this sub to identity flow, that part I didn't understand.
You see, even if you did not understand that, you don't need to worry about it, as I said, because these are just documentations which you need to do anyway, right? So what is
Hmm.
happening here, what I'm saying is, load the user with the help of username. Okay,
Hmm.
so load meaning where load. This means that this entire data is going into this JWT data, right?
Okay.
And what is this JWT data? It is this JSON basically.
Hmm.
All right, so now if you try, if I, or in the form of dictionary, in the form of Python, it is actually a dictionary,
Hmm.
right? Now if I tell you how do you retrieve user.username from this dictionary, what will you write? You will write the dictionary name and then the attribute name,
Hmm. Yes. Okay.
right? So this user.username is basically getting passed into identity. All
Okay.
right, and with the help of this identity, we are filtering the user object.
Okay. Understood.
Okay, so that is what we are trying to do. Even if the flow is again not clear, don't worry about it. I just wanted to give you an overview of what these two functions are doing. Okay, so if I just write this, write the comments here, I can write this function, user identity loader, tells you how to, or with what, my W is sometimes, with what you want to identify, with what you want to identify. Okay, okay, with what you want to identify, I want to identify, or I want to load my user with the help of this user.username. All right, and how does it happen? With the help of this function. Okay, so how do you want to load? Okay, now both these information, or both these functions, are revolving around loading of the user and storing it in the token. Okay, and that is what is security meaning, right? I will allow you to access a particular endpoint only if I know you, only if I can verify that you are there or not. So the entire idea of security revolves around the user object. All right. So this function, how do you want to identify the user? How do you want to load the user? All right. So that is what is happening here. I'll keep the comments as they are so that you later when you refer, you understand these things. Okay. So I hope this security part is clear. Now we are going to go to app.py. All right. Now app.py holds the entire configuration and other things. All right. So I'll write these things one by one. Okay, so finally, or firstly, in the app.py, we are going to import Flask because the Flask object or the application is going to get created here. So from Flask, import Flask. All right, this is the first import. Okay, now I will need to import the configurations, right? So how do I import configuration? From application.import. Sorry, application.config import. Sorry, import local development config. Right, so this is getting imported from the application.config. Then from application application.database import db because we need to import the db object. Then from application.models application.model, it is a singular in our case, application.model import user. All right, and then finally from application.security import jwt. So that object that we created in security is going to get imported here. So in every model you see we created an object which was imported, routes we do not import anything, and then finally the jwt object which was imported. All right, so these are the imports that we need at this point. Then we are going to create that create app application, create app function, sorry, create app function. Okay, here we are going to first load the application, which is going to be like this: Flask underscore underscore name underscore underscore. All right, then add configurations to this app object just created, app dot config. Okay, now generally when you use config without any config file, you would directly write something like this, right? So you provide dictionary and then you provide attributes one by one. Okay, so you will write SQL alchemy database URI app.config, then app SQL alchemy track modification, and then you give the value. But in our case, since we have that complete config object, we are going to use this method called from object. Okay, this is a method provided by Flask itself. So app.config from object, and within this will provide the thing that holds all the configuration. Okay, so it is the class that holds all the configuration. So basically it is with the help of this class, it is creating an object of that, and then that is the reason we have this method called from object. Okay, so we are loading the configurations likewise. All right, then I want to link my application to the db. So how do I do that? db dot init app, and then provide app object as an argument to this method. Similarly, how do I connect my application or link my application to JWT? Same process. JWT dot init app and provide app. Okay, and then we have the final context. Okay, this is the convention, or this is the, I would say, something that we will use even if you don't know what this is, right? So the app context dot push. All right, there is something called as context. Okay, app context or request context. Okay, so these two things are there with respect to Flask. I'm not going to get into details of that as of now, but just assume that we always need to use it when we are using this structure, right? And then finally we'll return this app object. Okay, all right, and then we create this variable called app, and then use this method called create app. This is just a convention, or this is just a structure that we follow to create application. What happens with this is, let's say tomorrow I want to add an API. Okay, so we have something like this: from application dot resources import API. Something we have, I mean, currently we do not have resources module and anything, that is fine. But let's say, assume that we have a resources module that creates an API, which is basically a Flask RESTful API. Okay, Flask RESTful API. And I want to connect this API with this app. The only thing that I need to do is just write this: API dot init underscore app, and then provide app object to it. Okay, so this is the only thing that I need to do. Okay, next time when I run this app.py, this entire function will run from the beginning, and then sorry, this entire function will get compiled from the beginning, and then it will be assigned. So this entire app object with all the configurations done will be then assigned to our app. Okay, so that's why we are creating this function. Okay, we don't need this. I will remove this entirely because this will create confusions. Okay, and with that we'll remove this also. Okay, now we have the app object created. All right, now what we are going to do is we are going to run this applications. How do we do that? If name equals to main, okay, we can directly write app.run. Okay, now you can note one thing, since this is a development config, I can we generally use this, right? Debug equals to true. We generally use this, but in our case we don't need to. Why is that? Because our config file takes care of that. So in the config, we have set this variable or this attribute debug equals to true there itself, right? So when this entire config file or this local development config object gets configured to the application, the debug itself is set, right? So I don't need to write debug equals to true again here. All right. Now I will programmatically add some object, right? So I will be adding, I'll be doing some operations here, which will happen the moment I run this app.py file, right? So first thing is I want to create the database, right? So how do we create database? db.createAll, right? So db.createAll will first create the database. Then I will be creating two objects, user objects, obviously, because that is the only model we have, right? So user objects. So I'll just write user1 equals to, how do we create? User, okay, and then we will provide all the attributes, which will be, let's say, username equals to user underscore 01, and password equals to 1234. Okay, so note that the password is also put in string because our password is done in string. So one important thing I noted, that the password spelling is wrong. All right, so it is password. Okay, so password db.column text. So it is actually storing text, right? So even if I'm providing numbers as password, I will just put it in the form of text, because this password can later have something like this also, right? ABC. It can be a combination of numbers, letters, special characters, things like that. So it's always better to keep it text. All right. This is the first user that I'm going to create. All right. Let us create one more user on the similar grounds. So it will be, let's say, user two. Okay, and user 2. Let us keep the password same, because we have made that provision that password can repeat, right? It is not a unique entity. All right, now what I'll do is I will add both of these to the session. So how do we do that? db dot session dot add. But since I want to add both of these together, instead of simply doing add, I'll do add all. All right, and what does add all takes? It basically takes the list. All right, and list of what? These objects we have created. So user one, user two. Okay, user one and user two as list. All
So
right, and
can
then
we
finally
prompt the user as well?
from the user meaning.
Means let users define the username and password when the app starts.
Yeah, we can do that, but then you will need a front end for that, right?
Okay.
As of now, we don't have front end. We are only planning to do the back end, and this is for the demonstration. We will not need it always.
Okay.
Okay, so later on, what is going to be there? You will have this login form or register form. Basically, this register form will take the username and password from whoever is trying to create the application. That register form or the register page that you see, which is going to be a view component. We saw view component yesterday, right? It is going to be a
Mhm.
view component, which will in turn have a method called login or register user, right? And
Yeah.
then it will register user. For that, we'll have to also define a route which adds it to the to the backend. All right,
Okay.
so obviously those things are going to be there.
Means we define it in the routes and then we import it here, and then we call that function in the name underscore main, right?
We don't need to call that function because yeah, I mean, we can do that, but see, it is going to be a web app, right? So it is,
Mhm.
instead of creating it as a simple function, you should create it as a view function. So you go to an endpoint, provide the information, and when you go to that endpoint, hit enter, it will automatically trigger the function,
Okay.
right? And why am I not doing that is because you don't have a front end at this point. All right, I can just create a route, take those values from from JSON and all those things, make a request and still do that. But obviously that is a repetition of things, we that repetition of things, right? And we are not focusing on how do you create a user, we are focusing on how do you secure the endpoint. All right.
Sure.
So with this, what is going to happen? The moment I create my application, this entire users, these two users are going to get created, and they will be getting added to the session, and then finally, the session will be committed. All right. And there is one more catch here. Since this is only for demonstration purpose, I can just use it once. Once the users and everything are created, I will have to comment these lines. Okay. So this is just a alternate way, or what do you say? A shortcut of creating users, since we do not have a front end. Why do I need to comment it later? Because the moment again my application runs, it is going to create a new user object with username user underscore one. And the problem with this is it will fail the unique constraint, right? So this will throw error. That is the reason the moment my my database and everything is created, I'll comment these lines and move forward. Okay, I will show you that error also if you want, but I think this is clear. Okay, why that error will come. All right, so this is our app.py. Okay, now what we are going to do is we are going to create some routes also, right? And those routes also need to be configured with our application. Okay, so what I'm going to do here, I'm just going to create some routes. Okay, so for example, if I want to create a route, let's say slash home. So what will I do? At the rate app dot route, then I'll write slash home. Okay, let's not worry about methods and everything for that now. Okay, and then we'll define home. Okay, this method, and then we will write the information about. Okay, and then we'll return something, which is fine. Okay, now one problem here is, what is this app, right? So we do not know this app. So for that, what we will do, we'll try to import that app. Okay, and where is this routes? Basically it is here in the application folder, and my app, the app object which is created, is in the outside folder. So for that, what I'll have to do, I'll have to use dot dot. Okay, so from dot dot app import app. Okay, so dot dot meaning you go one step above, okay, in your folder. All right, so at the moment, I mean, if you may have also noticed, right? So the moment I write from dot, it will give you the list of all the files in your current directory. Current directory meaning the directory where routes.py is present, very similar to how we did it in JavaScript yesterday, right? So dot, the moment I write another dot, it will go back go up one step and then tell you how many directories or files are there uh, in the directory right above it. And from there we are importing app, and from that app.py we are importing this app object. Okay, okay, this is fine. So I imported app and use this application. Okay, fine. Now let's say I want to use all the routes here back to, because obviously these routes need to be connected to my application. So what will I do? I will go back to my app. Okay, and the moment where my app is created, I'll import all the routes here. So from application dot routes import. Now there are going to be multiple routes, so I will just import. I will just write star. Is there any issue? Why does it say? What is the error it is saying? By the way, I don't want to.
Sir, won't this
Statements.
generate, sir,
Hmm.
won't this generate circular reference error here because I'm like importing
Hmm.
app in routes and then importing routes
Yeah,
in.
that is what I'm trying to say. That is what I'm trying to. That is the next thing that I'm going to come. Right. The problem here is, what is happening here in the routes. I'm importing app. Okay, and within the app, I'm using this app in the routes. And again, I'm going back to app and importing routes. Okay, so the routes are importing some part of the app or the entire app, and on the other hand, the app is also importing the routes and some parts of routes. This is what is called as circular import. So you cannot share things between modules like that, right? If a module 1 is dependent on module 2 cannot be dependent on module 1. That is what is happening here. Okay, my app.py is dependent on routes for the endpoints. On the other hand, my routes is dependent on app for this app object. Okay, so what is the solution? The solution is removing this line. Okay, we do not need this. This is not how it is done. So what we do, or what Flask does, is it provides something called as current app object. Okay, that refers to, or that is a reference of current application that is running. Okay, so what I'll do, from Flask import current app, meaning currently running app, currently loaded app. All right. And since the Python also has a way of providing aliases to a particular object, I can just use as app. Okay, so what is happening here? My current app, which is running, my running current app, which is provided by Flask, is imported into this module, and I can name it anything I want. So I named it as app for simplicity because I'm very familiar to this structure. I'm not familiar to writing @current app.route. I'm familiar to writing app.route. Therefore, I've imported it and I named it as app. Okay, so what is happening here? This current app is not getting imported from my app.py. It is getting imported from Flask as a whole. All right, which I don't need to worry about now. So the circular import thing is gone, and obviously the routes will be imported from here only. Okay, that is the reason we will need routes. This error is probably because we do not have anything in, or still we have. You see why that error is from
Import
app.application.routes. Sorry. Okay.
from means like a
Okay.
You are
from
using
From.
import
import now.
Yeah, from.
from.
Sometimes I mix JavaScript and Python both. Okay, so from application.routes import route. Now what is going
So
to
why
happen?
we didn't put this at the very top?
That is because let's see if I put this on the top.
Mhm.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Let's see if I put this on the top. What is going to happen? It tells you you import all the routes from where? From this routes.py, right?
Mhm.
Now, when you
Mhm.
import all the routes.py, this will be importing this @app.route. It is going to import everything, right?
Mhm.
And @app.route, meaning app.route is going to get imported here, right? But at this
Okay.
point, is the app object created?
No.
No. That is the reason we will need it at the bottom
Okay.
after the app object is created.
Mhm.
Okay, that is the reason this particular line or this line itself is imported outside. All these things which are imported on the top are not dependent on my app object. My app object is in turn dependent on these two, right? But this application.route is inherently importing app, right? Which is dependent on this app function. Okay, that is the reason I cannot import it on the top. Okay, so I need to import it once the app is defined. Okay, so this is the right place to import. Okay, clear now? Any other
Yes, sir.
query in this particular module? Okay, now our complete setup is done. Complete setup is done. So what I'll do, I'll run this application and show you what is happening. Okay, obviously I'll comment this because this will cause a lot of error. Okay, so we'll go to app.py and we'll open a terminal. Okay, and we'll run this. So it is going to be Python app.py. Okay, now for those who are doing this very first time, you definitely will not have this JWT extended, right? So what you'll do first is you'll do a pip install. So you'll do pip install Flask JWT extended. All right, so you'll do this first and then you do a pip install. Then you do a app.run or app.py. So it is going to be like that. So it is Python. Since I already have it, I'll write Python app.py. Let's see if I have it. I'm not sure. All right. Okay. Some issue. Okay, see, yeah, so this is the error I was talking about, right? So what happens is when you run this application, it runs on a loop, right? Our Flask application runs on a loop because it has to listen for requests. So what happens once this line of code gets executed, my application is running on a loop. It is waiting for the changes to happen. It is running for the loop. The second time it runs here, it will try to again create a user object. Okay, and the moment it creates a user object, it is going to throw this error. You see this unique constraint failed. Okay, for the first time it is going to be fine. Why is that, and how can I verify that it was fine? It ran fine for the very first time. I have this proof, right? Instance folder. All right, so I have this instance folder which has jwt data.sqlite3, and when I open this, I should have two users there. Okay, so you see I'm not able to zoom this. Not sure how to zoom. All right, but you see that there are two users: user underscore 1 1 2 3 4 5, user underscore 2 1 2 3 4 5. How do I get rid of this error? This is how. All right, so we don't need this database. You don't need to create every time. User one, you don't need to create every time. So no creation, no adding to the session, no commit. Save this, Now run your application, it will run just fine. All right, no error thrown. Okay, this is something is like a is a bad way of creating user, because in application we will not create users like this, right? It is just for the testing purpose, demonstration. Okay, I just wanted to create user with my application running itself. That is the reason I did this. Later on I will not need it. Okay, and I'm not creating at this point, I'm not creating provision to keep on creating users as and when you want, right? My work will be done with these two set of users only, so I won't be creating any more users now. So at this point my application cannot create users, but it has some pre-created or pre-existing users, and I'll make use of that only. Okay, so my application is running, and apart from this error, no errors are thrown. This means everything is working fine, all the configurations and everything are done. There is no circular imports also. All right, now the next thing that we're going to do is see how these things work. What exactly are we I mean, every application is running, but what exactly is happening? Okay, so for that we'll come to this routes.py now and create actual routes. Okay, are we clear till this point? Any doubt? Okay, so first I'm going to create a route that tells or that allows the user to log into the application. Okay, now what do you mean by login? Let's see. First I write slash login. Okay, and this slash login meaning you're trying to send some data to the server, right? We are not having a front end. This means there is no chance or there is no point of writing a get method. Okay, we are not retrieving a form at this point. What we are trying to do is we are creating API that takes the user data and then does something with that data at the backend. All right, so what method are we going to use? We are going to use only post method. Okay, so in the methods column or in the methods attribute, I'm just going to mention post. All right, so generally in any app dev 2 project, API based project, you will only create endpoints that take data back from client to server. Okay, not any endpoint or not any endpoint that returns some form or something, because that form and everything part will be done by the front end. So your view will take care of how to show form, where to show form, and when to show form. Okay, but what to do with the data will or should be defined by the APIs. So I directly write the post method. Assuming that the data is retrieved, what should happen? That should be the case when you define a mat2 project. Okay, so once this is done, I will create a function. So it can be login, anything you want. Okay, still shows some error. Is that expected indented? Oh, expected indentation. Anyways, fine. All right, so the first thing that I'm going to take is username. Okay, username. Now generally when if you recall your app dev 1 project or app dev 1 anything you did, lab assignment or anything, how would you retrieve user information, or how would you retrieve any information that is coming from form? You would write request.form, request.form, right? And then request.form.get, either it is username, password, or things like that. In our case, it is not going to be form because there was never a form created by the backend, right? But what is retrieved at the backend? How is front end and backend communicating with each other? How is the data transferring from one place to the other, client to the server? It is transferred in the form of JSON. This means I will not be, my request will not be having a form data. It is not going to have a payload. It is going to have a JSON body as request data, right? So it is going to be request.json.get instead of request.form.get. All right. So you need to understand the differences, what is happening in AppDev 2 or the API based project or API based application, and what used to happen in non API Jinja based application. All right, so there was always a form which used to take information from the client to the server, right? So therefore, the request.form.get would take information from the payload, right? But there is no form here in API-based projects. So what is going to happen? The information or the whatever information you put on back to the server is going to be retrieved from JSON or request body. All right, or it is simply put, the information is going to retrieve from the request body, which is stored in the form of JSON. So instead of writing request.form.get, I would write request.json.get. Okay, now one problem, request, right? So that has to be imported. So what I'll do, from flask import request. All right, so the moment I do this, the request is imported. Now how do I retrieve the username? Like this same process, username, and then similarly I have a password, right? So I'll just copy the top the line from the top, password, and paste it here. Okay, so these are the two fields that I'm going to retrieve. So when I say that I'm going to get password or username from this attribute called username, I'm going to get password from this attribute called password. I need to make sure that the request body should have these attributes only. It cannot have pass. Okay, it cannot have anything else. It cannot have pwt. It cannot have anything else. It should, it should have exact same attribute which is used here. Okay, now what do I mean by that? We will be clear in some time. All right, now let's say my username is retrieved. With the help of this username, can I retrieve user object from the database? Definitely yes. So how do I do that? I'll just write user object, okay, a variable called user, and then I write user dot query dot filter by username. So I want to filter by username, and what do I provide as RHS? Username. Okay, so this is coming from the model and this is coming from the form, right? Username. Okay, and then you can use first. All right, but just I want to introduce you to one more method that is that would work, is something called as one or none. Okay, one or none. So same thing. So it is very similar to how we write first, right? So first returns the object if the object is found, and it returns null if nothing is found. Same thing. Okay, it returns the object if the object is found, and if it returns null if nothing is found. Okay, none in case of Python it's none. Okay, that is why we are writing one or none. Okay, well, now what is this user? This is a reference to user model, so that needs to be imported. How do we import that? From dot model import user. All right, why is that? Because both routes.py and model.py are in the same subdirectory. So dot model. Okay, now with the
So
help
can
of
you
this
please use the
user,
terminal? So
sorry.
can you please reduce the terminal width? The
Yeah,
terminal width.
sure. Okay, yeah, that's fine. We don't need that as of now. All right, now once we are retrieving this user, based on this user, we can write some conditions and see what is happening. All right, so if not user, or I'm just writing one condition, then I'll explain what that is. Not user dot password equals to password, meaning either user object is null or user object is found, but user dot password is not matching with password provided by the request body. Then you do something. Okay, understood the condition? So there are two things changed, two things checked here. Whether first condition is not user, meaning if the user is null or none, then this condition will become true. Or if the user is found but user dot password is not equals to password, then this condition will become true. Okay, so that is what it means. So when this condition becomes true, meaning if the username is not correct or the password is not correct, we'll simply return a simple text, right? We will simply return a JSON. All right, so in our case we are always API. What does API returns? It always returns a JSON. Doesn't matter what it is, doesn't matter whether it is proper data that is being retrieved, whether it is error message, anything that you want to return, it should be written in the form of JSON. All right, and I'm going to use this JSONify method for that. So JSONify. All right, and we also need to import it. So from Flask import request and JSONify. Okay, so what is this method? What does this method do? You can simply write message equals to and write the message incorrect username, incorrect username or password. Okay, incorrect username or password. So if the password itself is incorrect or the username itself is incorrect, meaning your request body was itself incorrect, there was an issue with request body, the information that was provided by you was incorrect, so you'll write or you'll return a status code called 400. Okay, so 400 stands for bad request, that is your request itself is not correct. Okay, so I'll return 400 here. Okay, otherwise If this condition becomes false, this entire condition becomes false, this means the only meaning for that is there is an existing username and the password is also correct, right? The username exists and the password is also correct. Then you need to create an access token. Okay, once the credentials match, only then you need to create an access token. Okay, so how do you create access token? Something like this. This will create this variable called access token, and then we'll use this method called create access, sorry, access token. Okay, and here we will provide the identity equals to user. Okay, so what is this? Basically, first this create access token needs to be defined. This create access token is basically a method provided by JWT extended, right? So what, that is what I'm going to import now. So from Flask, do I have it? Yeah, already there. Flask JWT extended import create access token. All right, so once I import create access token, what it does is, it, this particular method has an attribute called identity. Okay, and in the identity it will take this object, okay, user object. Okay, when you do this, these methods will internally come into picture in the security config that we did. They will inherently do their work, load the name with the username and load the actual user and then return the complete user object. All right, so that has to be provided here. Okay, so this complete user object I'll provide, that will be provided as identity. Within the identity, the functions that we have provided in the config will internally come into picture, and the token will store entire user objects information. So for example, the user, in our case, the user has this username and password attribute, right? Both the attributes, both the information of that attributes will be saved in the token. Okay, if the username has, let's say, 5 other attributes, username, password, role, okay, then in, let's say for example, we are writing a blog app, so blogs for that user, all those things, every information that is relevant or related to the user will be stored in the token or can be retrieved from the token. All right, so the token will make sure or will encrypt the user information and store it with itself, and that is what we are trying to return when everything is set, meaning when the username and password are correctly given. Okay, so we create this token and we simply return it. JSONify access token equals to access token. All right, so what now what is this JSONify method does? It basically converts this attribute and value into a JSON. All right, so what it will return here is, for example, if I'm providing a wrong information, either username or password, what is it going to return? It is going to return a JSON, something like this, message, and then it will return this. Okay, so as the name suggests, it took an attribute, it took the value, and then it JSONified it. Okay, that is what it means. So it is going to return something like this if the username or password is incorrect. If the username and password is correct, both are correct, it will then return something like this. Let me just copy this and show you. Okay, so it will then return something like this. So LHS will be as it is coming as a key access token, and then here this will be token, which will be anything that starts with EY. So generally these token will start from EY. Okay, so it will be something like this. Okay, so we'll see that once we do a successful login and credentials and everything. Okay, so
So
this is
then,
what is hmm,
sorry, sir. Then you
yeah,
mean that it's encrypted? The
yeah, it
user.
is going to be encrypted. Yeah,
Normally, then what happens is that for Flask security, we normally return a JSONify with the user object, then auth token separately, and all that. But
hmm.
here, we don't need to return the username or the role or anything like that. The entire thing will be.
We Yeah, everything will be encrypted by the token. So what do I mean, or what do I say when I explain this? Create access token will load the entire user information, meaning the password of the user, the username of the user, any other attribute of the user, everything will be imported, stored in the form of token, and returned, so I can then use it later.
Sir, can I ask one more question? Sir,
Hmm,
you have
hmm,
taken user to be the identity. Now,
hmm.
like, let's just say if, like, normally in a Google, somebody can use the mobile number or can give the email name, right, as the
No, no,
identity.
no, no, no. Yeah, yeah, no, no. So what you need to understand is this is not an attribute of a user. is mobile number can be an attribute of user, right? So for example, if you're trying to store multiple users in your application, every user can have their own mobile number. But is this an attribute? This is not an attribute. This is the entire user object. So mobile number can one of the attributes of the user, right? So identity should be an object.
Okay, you
Okay.
mean line number
And
12, the user from line number 12.
yes, yes, yes.
Okay, okay,
All
okay.
right. So these entire user objects. This means if I'm storing the user object, I'm storing every attribute of the user object. So if you want to, let's say later on get access to the mobile number of the user, this user object will itself provide you everything in the form of token. Okay, we'll see that. Okay, we'll see that later. So for example, just see this model. This model has two attributes, right? Username and password. Can you have another attribute like mobile number in here?
Yeah, we
Yes,
can.
sir.
We can. If you have this, and I'm saying that the user object will be entirely encrypted in the form of token, can I later access mobile number of that user? Definitely.
Yes,
Yeah,
sir.
Right?
yeah, we can, I
Definitely.
guess.
Right. Yeah, we can. And I'll show you that. I mean, from this example, we have username and password. So you need to remember that username and password are attributes of a user. And later on, with the help of this token, I will be able to access both username and password. Okay. All right.
Okay, got it.
So why to identity? Why to set identity as one of the attributes when you can completely set the object itself as the identity? All right. Did you get this? And that is in fact required because later on, when the user logs in, you will require multiple other information of the user specific to the user, right? So why to set particular one or two things as identity? Set the user object, complete user object instead as the identity, and you will be able to access anything and everything you want. Okay, we'll see that in one of the endpoints later. Okay, but the main objective of this endpoint is whenever the user logs in and the credential matches, you will get an access token. Okay, this is the main idea of security for that matter, right? And as I said in the start of the session, I said, what does security mean when it comes to an application? Whether the user has logged in with the correct credentials or not. So it will revolve around the user object, not any attribute of user object. Okay, attributes anyway, I mean, once you have access to the object, you will have access to the attributes. Okay, and we are halfway done, right? So we are done halfway. Most of the things will be more clear when I create the another endpoint. Okay, so first we'll see how this endpoint works, then we'll see what we'll do with that token. Once the token is there, what do we do with that? All right, and why are you saying that getting a token or receiving a token is a sign of correct successful login? Why are you saying that? All right, so this is what we are going to cover, but let us verify whether we are getting the user token and everything or not. All right. Now, since this is all an API, I'll be using Postman or a Thunder client, which is an agent that allows you to make requests, right? I won't be using browser because again, you can see I need to make a post request, which is not possible with browser if I'm not using a form, right? So I want to make a post request explicitly. So what I'll do is I'll use Thunder client. So this Thunder client is one of the agents that allows you to make HTTP calls over the server with any method you want, right? So I'll just create a new request. Okay, here I will write the endpoint of that the URL of that API. So it is going to be HTTP colon, I'm not sure how to zoom this in. Okay, so you need to believe me when I'm writing HTTP. Okay, HTTP colon slash slash then 127.0.0.1 colon 5000 slash. Okay, and what is the endpoint we have? Login, right? Slash login. So this is the endpoint I want to hit. What is the request URL? It is this. Okay, what is the request method? It is post. So I need to make it post. All right, and then what is it I'm trying to provide with my request? The user credentials, right? So those user credentials will be provided in the form of JSON body. That is the reason when I wrote the backend, I use request.json.get, right? So whenever this information will go, this login or this login endpoint will fetch for where is the request body. Okay, from the request body, it will see, okay, the request body has some data which is coming in the form of JSON. Okay, so from the request body, you get the JSON, and from the JSON, you get the username. Okay, that is what we tried to do there. Okay, this means I need to provide some request body when that is what I'm doing here. Okay, so how does my request body look like? It looks like this: username, okay, and password. Username and password. All right. Now, first, what I'll do is I'll write a wrong username. Okay. We do not have user underscore 03, right? We have user underscore 1, user underscore 01, and 02. We do not have 03. So I'll make a request with incorrect username first. Okay. Password can still remain same. Doesn't matter. All right. And you note this. What are the values of these attributes I've written, or what are the attributes name, username, and password? Exactly matching the attributes written here. Okay, because that is what it is going to refer to when it is retrieving data from you. Okay, now let us make a request here. Okay, it returns 400. This means it is a bad request. Your request is wrong. And what is the message we are getting? Incorrect username or password. Okay, have you seen this? Yes. Okay, so what is it going to return? It is going to return a JSON whenever there is an incorrect username. And what is going to be the JSON? This. All right, what is going to be the status code? Whatever we returned here. Okay, and the status code should tell you exactly what has happened, right? So with this status code, what can I infer? I can infer that okay, there is some issue with incorrect. There is some issue with my request. All right, and what is the issue with my request? My username is incorrect. Okay, now what do? We write a correct username but incorrect password. All right, correct username but incorrect password. Let us make a request. Okay, same thing. All right, so when the username is incorrect, it will give you incorrect username or password. When the password is incorrect, it will give you username or incorrect username or password. Okay, so it may have retrieved the user object, but it could not verify the password, and hence it will give you this. Okay, now let us do it with both correct. What do we get? We get a token. Okay, so how does this look? EY something, right? So that is what I told you here. Security, not security routes. Okay, so you will get something like this. Generally, the tokens start with EY. I don't know why. There is no specific reason for that, but it is configured. Sorry, it is encrypted. Okay, now this token is very important to us. Where are we here? This token is very important to us because firstly, it is encrypted. Okay, secondly, what does it encrypt? It encrypts the entire user information. If you want to access the username of the user, you can get it. If you want to access the password of the user, you can get it. Okay, so this token is very important to us. All right, now how do we make use of this token is it will be defined by the next route that we are going to create. Okay, so I'll keep these both endpoints, this possible responses here also, and I'll create a new endpoint now that uses this token, and that is protected. All right, so what do you mean by that? Let's see. So what I'll do is I'll create another endpoint called app.route. Okay, app.route. And once you are successfully logged in, where do you want to go? You want to go to the dashboard. So I'll write /dashboard. Okay, everything in quotes. Okay, /dashboard. So app.route/dashboard. And here, are we sending any data to the dashboard? No, we are not sending. Dashboard is supposed to retrieve the data and give us the information, not take any information, right? So we don't need a post method or anything. And get method, if you are using, we don't need to explicitly mention it, right? So I will not mention methods equals to get. Okay, then I'll create the dashboard. Okay, this method I'll create. Okay, this method I'll create. Now, what do I want to, what this dashboard wants to return? Entire user information. In our case, it is only the username and password. But when it comes to an application, you will be returning user information, username, all those things. You will be returning all the, for example, we are creating a blog application, right? So there will be users, there will be blogs. So when you go to the dashboard of a user, you should be not only retrieving user information, but also blogs of that user, right? So all those information should be retrieved on the dashboard. Okay, in our case, we are going to only retrieve the username and password because that is all we have. Right now, how do we retrieve this information from the from the data? Sorry, how do we retrieve this information on the dashboard? One is we can make use of something like this. We can create a variable user equals to user dot query dot get and then 1. Okay, does not matter. I mean, it can be anything 1 2 3 because any primary key is fine, but this is not right. You want to retrieve information of only that user who is logged in, so you cannot provide it, you cannot hard code 1 or 2 or anything. right? Let's say later on a user logs in or is created in the database with, let's say, ID 1000. How will you put this information, right? So this is not the correct way. Okay, I need to do two things. One is I need to protect this route. What do I mean by protect this route? I will not be able to get to this endpoint slash dashboard if I am not logged in. Okay, if I'm not logged in, I will not be able to get the information from this dashboard. That is what is called as protection of the endpoint. All right, and what is making this protection available to us? A proper login, a correct login. This means if I am logged in correctly, only then I should be able to get the information, or only then I should be able to access. And that is true for every application, right? You will be able to see your information if you log in, right? That is the case. If I log in, I should be able to see only my information. You should not be able to see my information, or vice versa. I should not be able to see your information. So this dashboard should be a common dashboard created in an application that will retrieve user information based on who is logged in. All right, and now that we know we need to retrieve information based on who is logged in. This is where this access token will come into picture. Okay, because we somewhere know that this access token is storing the user information. Whose information? The user who is logged in, not anybody else's. Okay, token is generated only after successful login. This means the user who is logged in, that user's information only will be created in the or stored in the token. Okay, are we clear with this? So with that, what we are going to do is, first we are going to protect this route. Okay, and how do we protect this route? We are going to use this decorator called as JWT required. What does that mean? JWT required, what does that mean? If you want to access this endpoint, you should have a JWT, that is JSON Web Token. Meaning you should be providing, or you should provide the token along with the request. Whenever you're trying to request to this endpoint, you should provide correct token along with this endpoint. Okay, how to provide that is a second thing, but I hope you understood this. All right, so whenever we use this decorator, what it does, or what is this called as, you can say that it is, let me just write it, protected endpoint. Protected endpoint. How am I protecting this? I'm writing this decorator. This decorator, meaning this JWT required function, internally makes sure that nobody can just come right slash dashboard and be able to get the information. Nobody can do that. All right, who can do that? Only who is logged in. Only that person can do it. All right, so JWT required. Now where is this JWT required coming from? From the same place where create access token came. So we will write JWT required. All right, JWT required. So this we import from JW flash JWT extended and use it here. Okay, now what do we do with this information? We simply return. Okay, so one doubt is clear. Okay, one problem is clear, that okay, this endpoint is protected, meaning to be able to access this endpoint, I will be required to put in the token. The second doubt, the second problem still persists, right? How do I retrieve user information? How do I know that the token has information, but it is encrypted, right? How do I get the decrypted information, the actual information of the user? What happens is, whenever there is a successful login, okay, whenever there is a successful login, the Flask JWT internally creates a proxy of the user. Now what do I mean by proxy of the user? What happens is, this entire user object, okay, what is the user object we have at this point? Let's say user 01 gets logged in. Okay, so what information will I have of that user? I will have username. So it is going to be username equals to I'm sorry, not equals to, this value will be user underscore 01. Okay, and what is the other information we'll have? Sorry, password, which is going to be 12345. Okay, now this is information, this information is of the user object. All right, and I'm not retrieving user object anywhere here. To retrieve user object, I need to know primary or some information of the user, right? So how do I access the same information or information of the logged in user? What I do is I create a proxy. Okay, the moment the user logs in, the entire user information is loaded into this proxy. Meaning, if I write user.username, I can also write proxy.username. All right, and JWT has a fancy way of writing it, which is called as current user. Okay, what do you mean by current user? Currently logged in user. So what happens is, whenever a user is logged in, in the entire Python application, or wherever you wherever you write the endpoint, you have access to this variable called current user. So let's say if I want to access user.username, or if I want to access the username of the user, I would write something like this. Same thing, if I want to get the username from the proxy, I can write current user.username. All right, and this current user will be accessible only within the protected route. Okay, only within the protected route. If I remove this protection, the current user will not have any meaning. Okay, you will not be able to access current user if the route is not protected. Why? Because this JWT required, what does it mean? You need to provide token. So this means the current user will be retrieving that information from the token and storing within itself. If there is no JWT required, there is no token. If there is no token, how can you have current user, right? So this current user will be accessible within every endpoint that is protected. Okay, so let's say if I want to return the entire user information, what can I write? I can write a return. Okay, return, and then I'll use the same this JSONify method. Okay, now JSONify method has multiple way of writing. Either you write attribute equals to value, attribute name equals to value, or you simply pass on the dictionary. Okay, simply pass on the dictionary. Okay, so in this case, I'm going to pass on dictionary or the JSON itself. Okay, so how do we do that? What is the information I want? I want the ID of the user, so I can write ID colon. Okay, the second thing that I need is username. Okay, and the third thing that I need is password. The third thing that I need is password. Okay, now how do I access these information? I you know that within this endpoint I have access to something called as current user. So how do I access the ID of current user? Current user.id. Okay, how do I access the username of current of the user, logged in user? Current user.username. Similarly, I will write current user.password. All right, now obviously this is Python, so we need to put this in dictionary, I mean in the quotes. Okay, so what is going to happen in the dashboard? You will be able to get this information only when you are logged in. Okay, you are logged in, meaning you have the token. If you have the token, only then you will be able to get the information. Okay, so I'll just comment all these things because this is not a part of code. Okay, and okay, now problem is, what is this current user now, right? So that also needs to be imported from JWT. Okay, so the moment you do this, this underline and everything is gone. All right, so now the thing is, I can log in. Okay, I have an endpoint that logs in, that returns the token. The problem is, how do I provide token to this endpoint? Right, how do I provide token to this endpoint? So that is request. All right, so everything is working fine, there is no error at this point. Okay, there is no error at this point. Now I'll tell you how to make that request. So I'll go to this Thunder client and I'll do another new request. Okay, and within this new request, okay, let me just shorten this again. Within this new request, what we are going to do is write the endpoint of dashboard. HTTP colon slash slash 127.0.0.1 colon 5000 slash dashboard. Okay, now if I simply go to dashboard, what do I get? Okay, am I yeah, if I simply go to dashboard and just click send, what do I get? Okay, what does it say? 401 unauthorized, right? You're not logged in, meaning you see you're trying to get to a protected route and you have not provided the authentication token. Okay, the token is not provided along with this request. It will tell you 401 unauthorized. So what we have done with this, nobody can just go to this endpoint unless they are logged in. Okay, now how do I make sure that I provide correct authentication token with this? First, I'll go to the login page, hit enter. Okay, and I get the token. Okay, then what I'll do is I'll just copy this token. Then I'll go to the next request, and here in the headers, I will write authorization. I'll just create another key called authorization. Okay, and what is the value of that authorization? Token. Okay, and obviously you don't, the thing is, you don't provide the token directly, you provide it something like this: bearer, then space, then token. Okay, you don't provide the token directly, you have this bearer and then you provide the token. So whatever token, so what are you saying with this? I'm trying to get to this endpoint, and this is a proof that I'm correctly logged in. Okay, let's see what we get. So when I log in with this, now I get the information, and the correct entire information of the user is retrieved. Okay, how am I able to retrieve that information from the current user proxy that is available only with protected routes. Okay, so let's say, sorry, let me go to routes.py. The moment I comment this entire line, okay, the moment I comment this entire line, this means that my this dashboard endpoint is no longer protected. Okay, but with that, what happens? The current user will not have any meaning. Okay, because the current user fetches all the information from the token. If it is not protected, it does not have any information from the token, and the current user will start creating problems. Okay, let me do this, and then if we again go back to Thunder client and make a send request, it will give you error. What is the error? It says you are trying to fetch information with the help of current user. Now current user needs token. If you're not providing, if you're not saying that this route is protected, the current user will not have any meaning. Okay, so to be able to access the current user, to be able to access that proxy that the current user stores, all right, you need to have a protected endpoint. Okay, so when you protect this endpoint, sorry, I tend to forget that it is there in the same. Okay, when you protect this endpoint and then you do a send, you will get the entire information. Okay, so at the end of the day, what we have done, we have protected the endpoint and made sure that unless and until there is a proper correct token provided, you will not be able to get the information from the page, right? So what I'll do is I'll first remove this again and then make a request. It will again tell you that authorization header is missing. Okay, so this will also not give you any information. And for example, if somebody tries to do a bluff by giving any wrong token, okay, now I've changed the token, and if I do this, it will say invalid header, right? So it tells you that, okay, you have provided token, but we do not know what this token is. Okay, so that entire encrypted information that you get from this login endpoint should be put as it is, right? So nobody can just come and write anything they want and get the information, right? So token has to be there, and it has to be very, very correct. Okay, are we clear with this?
Sir, a few questions.
Hmm.
Sir, can you go back to config.py?
Hmm.
Sir, the authorization header you did not define here.
Yeah, authorization. Yeah, there's one more thing. Authorization I do not define here because that is a case, that is a config for flash security that we will need only in flash security. Now, one question you might ask, I have not set any method to encrypt the token, right? I'm providing my user information, but there is no method put, or there is no logic put to encrypt my token. What happens is this JWT secret key, this secret key internally, or JWT uh, Flash JWT extended will internally use this token to encrypt your user information and share the token, right? So it is internally doing that, and we don't need to provide any authorization header there. That is the case for Flash security. In case of JWT extended, there is a default header that you can use, which is authorization. Okay, which I've used in this request. So this is the default header you can use. Directly put authorization. One more way of doing authorization is just remove from here. Okay, go to this auth. Okay, then you go to bearer. Okay, and then you provide the token here also. That will also work. Let me copy this token from here. So you go to auth, then you go to bearer, and then here you provide the token. All right, and then when you make, sorry, not here. Yeah, here. Sorry, I should have put it here. Okay, now when you send the request, it will still work, right? So this is a by default header that you have. Okay, you don't need to explicitly do it. In flash security, you will have
So in flash
to. Okay.
security, this auth will not work. The when you're putting the authorization token, this will not
Hmm.
work.
No,
Auth,
because in flash security, it is not a bearer token,
so we don't need to
right?
write the bearer in flash security, right?
No, no, we don't need to.
And sir, can you please go back to that code, your the roots code, sir? Okay, so I'll come back with the question a bit later on. I'm just forming it in my mind. I'll come back later.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah. Anybody else? Any question? Is this understood, by the way, what we are trying to do here? So login, make sure that you have a correct token, and then this token has to be fed to every other protected endpoint to be able to get into the endpoint, right? So that's how we make sure that to be able to go to any other protected endpoint, you should first go through login, right? You cannot bypass, you cannot jump. Okay, that is the whole idea of authenticating a user.
Sir, I remember like the current
Hmm.
user in Flask security and current user in JWT, these are the same. They have the same functionalities, or like are they?
Yes, 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 yes.
And the JWT required is like login required or auth.
Login required, auth required, yes.
Okay, okay.
Right. So for those who are finding this question and the query that I've just clarified confusing is will be cleared if you watch the 3 sessions that I'm taking on security, Flask login, and JWT. All right. So I've covered multiple aspects and multiple methods of securing your application. Right. So I at this point you understand that there are 2 different types of application you create. One is Jinja based application, okay, and one is not Jinja based application, an API based application where you have the front end as well as the back end different. Okay, so when you have a Jinja based application, you can directly use Flask login, which is a session based token. Okay, session based authentication. All right, but API based application is something that you will do in MAT2, which will require token. Okay, that will not be a session based authentication, that will be a token based authentication. Okay, so in token based authentication there are 2 ways to do it. Either you do it with Flash security or you do it with JWT. Okay, Flash security is quite complex, a bit complex, so the configurations of Flash security is also complex. You set up session, you set up a token, you set up authorization key, all those things are required. Whereas in token, you just need to create a token, you just need to return a token with encrypted user information, right? So this is the only config you need, the JWT secret key. Okay, this JWT
Sir,
secret key is responsible for encrypting your user information. Yeah, go ahead.
sir, means at the very start of session, you told that means when we actually build the application, we will create view structure around it, right? So
Hmm,
if I
hmm,
want to do that, and also today, since we were only doing the API based, but
hmm,
if I want to do the front end based part,
hmm.
then how to do that? Have you covered it in any session
Yes,
or?
I have covered in the project sessions. In the project, we have created the end-to-end front-end back-end application, right? So I've covered that in the project sessions. Have you taken project this time?
My projected math one, sir. Regarding that only, I completed my Viva one. The results are still not out yet, so I'm
No, no,
just
no. So is it MAD 2 or MAD 1?
mad one, sir.
MAD 1. MAD 1, you see, MAD 1 is a Jinja based application, right? You don't create
Mhm.
this thing. So if you want to see how it is done in the MAD 1 application, you should watch the Flask login session. Yes, Flask
Okay.
login session. Okay, so these things are not there in Flask login because there we are not protecting a resource or API, right?
Yes.
There we have a form which takes the information to the server, brings it back in the form of response. So everything is done from the Flask login itself. So it is a session based authentication.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So I am using logging manager, so maybe that's why
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
find.
So login manager is basically what is Flask login, right?
Yes. Yes.
And so that's what. So here we have created only backend based application. We just have a backend. So when we create a view front end, we are only doing Madden project, right? So you don't need a view
Hmm.
front end there.
Yes. Yes.
So let's say whenever you work on your Mat 2 project, you should refer to the project sessions that we have covered, right? So
Okay.
what we did there, we first created all the backend, all the endpoints, protected them, everything is created. Then we went on to the front end. We created all the methods that do this. So here, what am I doing? I am manually hitting this endpoint, copying the token from here, pasting it here, and then making the request. There,
Yes, sir.
everything is done automatically through View.
Okay. View
So you should
handles that
watch,
entire process.
right. So you should watch the project session to get an idea of that.
Okay, sir.
Okay. Yeah. When we are creating a backend, we will test the backend through agents only. But when we are creating front end and the complete application, then we'll make use of everything, right? So view, how does it request to this endpoint, how does it take the token, how does the token goes to other endpoint, right? So all those things are taken care of in the project sessions. Okay, anybody else, any query?
Sir, one question. If you go to the login route, uh, yeah, it's about getting the request.json.get. Sometimes we see sir request.get underscore JSON, and then it's you, sir.
Those
What
are
is
different, those are various methods. This is the most simplest one. Okay, use this.
okay?
Request.c, what happens is there is either this method. Okay, see, if I want to use get JSON, what I'll do is I will just comment this entire thing. Okay, and I will do this user underscore cred. I will just create another variable and I write request dot get JSON. Okay, request dot get JSON. I'm not sure if parentheses are required or not. We will check. All right. Now this, so this is individually taking all the attributes, right? This takes the entire object. Entire object it takes. Let me just comment this line. Yeah, it takes the entire object. Meaning, if I want to pass on the username, I cannot do it like this. I will have to then do this. User cred, and then since we are referring to or trying to access an attribute of a dictionary, we'll use something like this. Okay. Here also we'll do the same thing. User cred. Okay, same thing. It will work the same way. Let us check this. Okay, the only thing that I'm not sure about is this parenthesis. We'll check. Okay, so we'll go to this login endpoint. We don't need this auth and everything here. We just need the body. All right, let me check this. Okay, so now it worked the same, right? I will paste it for your understanding. So what I'll do, I'll go to routes and I will print user cred. Okay, let us print user cred. So I'll go to this login endpoint and make a request again. So you see this. So the entire user body, what was sent in the request, will be fetched here. Now, how do you access it? By dictionary name, attribute name, like that.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Yeah. So I hope you got the both of the things right. So if you are using get JSON, use this. If you are using attribute wise, just do JSON.get, JSON.get. Okay. There is one more way of writing this. I will write that also so that there is one more, no other confusion also. So either you do this. Some people use get method. Some do this also. Okay. So this is another way of retrieving attribute wise values. Okay. So either of this will work, but you just need to modulate your code. So if you're using get JSON, you are fetching the entire object. So you need to fetch the attribute one by one. Okay, attribute wise. If you're doing that, if you're fetching itself one by one, then you don't need to worry about whether it is where is it coming from. Directly put username, directly put password, whatever you want. Okay, that is the difference.
So, sir, does this mean that in my Thunder client payload, suppose like there is option for username, password, and some other fields that are not mandatory?
Hmm.
So, get JSON would be a better option to use.
See, for it's fine that you can use either of this, but let us try to understand what we are trying to do with login. Generally, what do you provide in login?
No, I
You're
get
trying
that.
to log into your application. What do you provide? It's the username or password, email or password. That's it, right? So either it is going to be username or password, or it is going to be email or password. It is going to be either this, I mean, username, email or password. These are the only three things. You will never for the login, you will never put other attributes to login, right? So for example, if you see this request, how would you log in? You will just put the username and password. You will not put roles or anything to log in, right? Those things can be fetched later. Those things can be used here along with current user. Okay, so other attributes of users can be fetched. they should not be used to log in as such. Are you getting what I'm trying to say?
I get it. I get it.
Yeah. But still, if you want to provide anything, yes, that is the way. Just provide one by one, or just provide the entire user cred, and you can do it. Okay,
Okay.
but you need to understand what we're trying to do. Our objective is to log in. What is uniquely identifying the user? Username. How is it making sure that the correct user is trying to log in? By password. So those two things are more than sufficient to log in. Okay, so I hope this is clear. Any other query regarding this? Okay, so let's say later on I have a create blog endpoint, right? So something like this, @app.route, and then I have another endpoint /create. Okay, now who should create? Only the user who has logged in. So what I'll do, I'll protect this route. This is the only thing you need to do in every other route to protect them. So who should be able to create? The one who is logged in. Okay, that's how you create application which is secure. Nobody can just come in, type the endpoint, and be able to log, be able to create or be able to view information. Okay, so that is what is security in terms of, or backend security in terms of Flask, right? So we try to put everything around login, around the user object. So it is the user object that tries to log in. If the credentials and everything is fine, you are accessible, or you are able to go to various other endpoints. If you are not logged in, you should not be able to go to any other endpoint. So this is protection of endpoints. Okay, and how are we protecting them? With the help of token. It is the token that makes sure that, okay, the right user has logged in. Okay, this is what is called as JWT extended login, token based authentication. Okay, are we clear till this point? Any other query, anybody? Is there any doubt in chat? Was the Zoom fine when I zoomed in later? Okay. Okay, so you should watch the 3 sessions I was talking about, right? You can find Flask login in Mad1 playlist and security in September 24 playlist. Okay, all these things are available in the YouTube. Okay, Mad1 and Mad2 channel. Okay, so with that, I'll close this session. This is what I wanted to cover today. I hope you
Sir,
got the
one
glimpse
last
of what
question.
security is. Yeah, yeah,
Sir,
go ahead.
one last question, sir. In the project sessions, you took something called Bcrypt.
Bcrypt, yes.
Yeah, you installed it. I remember that session in
Hmm.
this term only, sir. You didn't use this year.
Bcrypt, I didn't use this term. It was not required.
No, I mean this session, sir.
This session, that's what bcrypt, what is bcrypt used for? Bcrypt is, okay, for example, here is my screen is shared, right? See, bcrypt is used to encrypt your password. Okay, and why do you want to encrypt your password? Because you don't want the developers also to see your password, right? So here, if you see JWT, my password is open password, right? I am a developer. I can see what the password is. But even if you don't want the developers to see the password, and which is fine, right? I do not want anybody to see the password. That is a thing that I want to keep. So what I'll do, directly before saving the password, I'll use this library called bcrypt. This bcrypt will, before it stores the password to the database, it will first encrypt it and then store the encrypted password, right? So it is optional whether you want to, it has nothing to do with the Flash security or JWT extended or anything. It is the sole requirement of using bcrypt is whether you want to store a encrypted password in the database or not. Okay, here I wanted to protect my user information on the browser side, right? User information should be protected on the API side. The API should be protected. I'm not worried about whether the password is encrypted in the database side. Okay.
Okay, sir, got it.
Yeah, so probably in last security session, you will find that I've used bcrypt, and the password is also encrypted when it's stored into the database. All right. But in case of project session that I've taken this term or the last term, I've used JWT. So in JWT, I was not worried about whether my password is a raw password getting stored into the database or the encrypted. Okay, so that distinction you need to be very sure of. Okay. Okay, so that is what I wanted to give today. Just go through this session once again, and you will get this information, right? This code will be uploaded to Solve with Instructor source code. Okay, so you can find it from there under the supplementary content, and you can get it from there. So yesterday we covered. It was an open session, right? So yesterday we covered CLI, right? So entire code related to CLI or Vite is put into the this thing supplementary content. So this code also will be put in supplementary content. You can directly fetch from there. And most of the things, if you see the configuration of how app.py is created, the configuration of this config.py and security.py that we had created earlier is going to be as it is. So you can directly use it in project. Okay, you don't have to add or change, make changes there. You can directly use this code there and it will be fine.
Sir,
Okay.
regarding yesterday's session about sale, I'm sorry I missed it. Sir, did you use View 2 or was it View 2 on View 3?
Does not matter. You can use either. So the I mean the process of using CLI will be same for view 2 and view 3. What I did was I use Vite. So Vite generally internally uses view 3, but if you see the structure and everything was very similar. So it I mean irrespective of what you use, whether view 2 or view 3, the code is going to remain same.
But sir, I had found that there are two ways of coding. Like one is options API,
Right.
and one is
Yes.
compositions API.
Yes,
And they
yes,
were
yes.
like one you the options API was using export default, and in the options API, a composition API, we had to use like whatever reactive elements that we put in view to in data, we had to use as
Huh.
ref, and like it was kind of a bit of a uphill task for me. So like what was done yesterday, and just if you can just give a brief.
It was options API. So options API I have used because it is more familiar to you. You have worked a lot on it, right?
Yes, yes,
So yeah, so
that's
it is
more with
options
view
API.
two. That is more inclined with view two, right, sir?
Yes, 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 yes.
Okay.
Right. So I've used options API in the last session,
Okay.
and you can use that also. Not an issue.
Okay.
Composition API I generally don't use because you see we are not gone into details of Node yet, right? So you will not be able to relate to it very easily. Okay, if you had knowledge about Node, then understanding composition API becomes easier. All right, but since week 3 we have been doing view 2, view 3 doesn't matter, but we were writing options API, so we are more familiar with how to create data, how to create methods, how to create computed properties, etc., how to add hooks and everything. So we are more familiar to that. So the idea of yesterday's session or using CLI was to understand CLI, right? So I was focused on CLI, keeping everything else in.
Got it, sir. So, and then in terms of sir quiz two, we can expect questions more from the options API.
It is going to be options API only. We generally don't put composition API questions.
Okay, sir.
Okay, because we don't thoroughly go into compositions API in sessions, right? So if you see, I mean, most of the question papers that you see, except one or two questions which we want you to, have that knowledge, get into documentation and everything. We don't get into, we don't deviate much, right? So whatever is covered thoroughly in sessions is mostly asked. Okay. So
And will it be
composition
from
API, since we don't cover, we won't ask.
and it will be from view two only.
Mute only, mostly.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. Okay then. All right. So with that, we will close today's session. Thanks everyone. Thanks for joining. This, yeah, Bhumika, go ahead. Before you go ahead, I will just finish. So this session will be added to the YouTube playlist for theory, and the code will be added to supplementary content. Okay. All right. Yeah, Bhumika, go ahead.
Yes, sir. So I have one doubt. So in one of the sessions for the week 6 you took for in the previous term,
Hmm.
uh, so you were discussing about the router and the one thing like a export default and the
Hmm.
import thing.
Hmm.
So you mentioned like when we write the export default and then you describe the template, we can write anything after the import in other
Hmm.
files.
Hmm. Hmm.
So but when I tried like and I used const home and then I defined some template.
Hmm. See, the thing is, When you directly do this export, my screen is shared, right?
Yes, sir.
Export default, and then you write the options object, for example data. Okay, then you write methods. You are simply exporting this component, right? This object you are exporting. Have you named this object here?
No, sir, not
No,
now.
you have not named it. This means it is simply exported. How you want to use there, you can use anything, right? So for example, this is module 1, right? So let's say this is module component module. Okay, this is the component module where you have defined the component. Okay, and then you have simply exported with default. Later on in the other module where you are importing this, how will you import? You'll write something like this: import, and then name whatever you want. Okay, and generally you use the same name or similar name, which is the name of the component. So for example, I do this home from something like this dot slash. Well, this is Python, but I'm writing JavaScript. Okay, home, import home from dot slash wherever, right? So this home will work because you had not named it. All right. This is one way of doing it. But let's say if you are doing it, if you're creating it something like this, const homes equals to data methods, etc. Please note that this is homes. This is the name given, right? So how do you export this? Export default homes. All right, this is also export default, this is also export default, but you're directly exporting and defining the object there itself. Here you are naming the object first, defining it, and then exporting it. So how do you import it in other module? Same thing, but you have to be very careful of what was exported. Okay, what was exported from there? Homes. Sorry. So if
So,
homes is
like,
exported, home should be imported.
sir, in the second case, for the
Hmm.
const home, I
Hmm.
tried using the same thing like export default home. So I like after the import, I've written like the capital H, but it worked fine, sir.
Capital H meaning
Yeah, I changed the import keyword after.
this.
Yes, yes, sir.
Mm, see, that should not work. I'm not sure why it worked in your case. So, what is the error then? What is the issue? What is it? What is
Like,
your doubt? Where is it?
yes, sir. So I was stuck in this only. Like I have defined the const homes, and I was trying to export the default homes only. But in the
Hmm.
after the import, I was writing anything. It was working fine.
Hmm.
So is this case with the default keyword? Like we can like first I understood the first case export default,
Hmm.
but the
Hmm.
second
Hmm.
one I
Hmm.
did out with it.
Uh, yeah. Okay. So, I will see one probable reason for that is what happens is, let's say when you use export default. Okay. When you use export default, you cannot use this. So, for example, in the same module, let me just create a new file. Okay, so let's say in the root folder I've created a new file, let's say homes.js. Okay, you name this file homes.js. Let us open this. Now what is happening here? Let's say if I do two exports here. Okay, for example, something like this const, or sorry, something like this export const home 1 equals to, and then you define the object. Okay, and then what you do is you create another variable const home 2, which is another object. Okay, and when you do export default, yeah, default, when you do export default and home 2, what happens is this export will not be exported, because when you say export default, only one export, whichever you are using with default, only that thing is going to get exported. So although these modules has two exports, home 1 and home 2, whichever you are using with default, only that will get exported. So this means what JavaScript says, okay, if you're exporting home to only, if only one thing is getting exported, it does not matter what you name there. It will, you can take any name, because see, what the name was is not important. What was exported is important, right? This right hand side, what is defined is important. And when you use default, only that thing is exported from the module. So whenever you use multiple exports, only the default export is going to get exported from the module. This will not be exported. Okay, or you cannot import or use this because the default thing has something else in the export. So probably that is why it is irrespective of what the name is, it is working fine. Did you get what I'm trying to say here?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is, let's say when I use an export default with a module, the only thing that gets exported is the one that is used with default, right? And only that thing is getting exported. So when it is very clear that, okay, from this component, only this object is getting imported, it does not matter what you name it, you know the definition, right? And what is important to us is the definition. Now, why we are giving name then? Why do we give name in the other module? Because you need to use it, right? So for example, when you use routes in the component attribute, you need to provide what component to be added, right? So there you can use anything you want, name. So you just name it there and use it within, because that name is required for you to use it in the module. Are you getting this?
Yes, sir.
So that is the thing. Okay, so probably that is the reason why it was still working. Okay, is your confusion or doubt cleared, or you want to add more?
Yes, sir. So it's clear. Thank you, sir.
Okay. All right then. So then with that, we will close this session. Thanks everyone. Thanks for joining. And as I said, the docs and everything will be added in the supplementary content. Okay. I'll stop sharing.